So, you know Ron Cluze? How many of you know Ron Cluze? I was in Collegedale, he was my teacher. And we had a weekend of revival. And he told us about the need to live with God. And he said, God wakes me up every morning and I start the day with him. And he says, I got into the habit to wake up around 4:35. And if I don't do that one day, I have no joy and no power. But when I do that, God is with me. And I can sense his presence, and I sense his voice. And when I obey, things go great. And when I don't obey, it's a mess. And I can hear his voice. And then he says, I had a conflict with my wife. She was angry with me because God answers my prayers, and God doesn't answer her prayers. And he says, God answers prayers. You just don't pray. And she says, well, I pray too. No, you don't. You pray 1 minute, I pray 2 hours. She says, well, I have a real job. I'm not a pastor. When they say that, I feel like, And so he says, no, it's not that you have a real job and I don't. It's that you love sleep more than love Jesus. Hello? Because if you love Jesus more than sleep, you make Jesus a priority and start the day with Jesus. And she says, but I sleep hard, I cannot wake up. And he says, Jesus can wake you up. Yeah, but I sleep hard. Ask him and mean it. Because if you don't mean it, don't expect him to answer. Well, he told us that he sleeps really light. If somebody moves in the house, he wakes up. You can chop wood on her body, she will not wake up. And he says, she doesn't hear the phone, she doesn't hear the clock, she sleeps like a piece of wood, And she prayed, and she said, Lord, do whatever it takes, and wake me up. This is the story, and we finish. Wake me up in the morning. I want to have my day, every day, filled with your presence. She prayed seriously that night, and she says, I want from today on to change my life. And I cannot. And I have no power and no victory. But I know that if you come into my life, you bring the power and the victory. So would you wake me up from now on that I start my days with you? And she went to sleep. At 5:15 a.m., they had, in that time, an old telephone with a wheel. You remember? If you remember, you must be old. Okay. Yes. And they had an answering machine that had red lights with numbers, and had that was the caller ID, and an answering machine with tapes that you would have to rewind the tape and then listen to the message, Anyway, and so she says, at 5:15, the telephone started to ring. And it kept ringing and ringing and ringing. And she says, I don't know how long. 10, 15 minutes, half an hour, I don't know. But she says, it was like a dream. I would want to wake up, and I could not, and I was trying to wake up, and I realized that the phone rings, and I said, man, but it keeps ringing for the last I don't know how many minutes. And then she says, why didn't Ron hear the phone? Because always, as soon as he picks it up. And she jumps at him, and she takes his pulse, and he's sleeping like a baby. He's alive. But he doesn't hear the phone. And the phone keeps ringing. And she says, why doesn't the answering machine pitch in? Because after the 4th ring, usually the answering machine answers. And so she looks, and the answering machine is on. And she looks to the caller ID, and it says 0000. And the phone keeps ringing, and ringing, and ringing. And she picks it up, 5:15. And the answering machine doesn't answer, and my husband doesn't hear. And she's like, yes, like, who is calling at this time? And she hears a voice, Lisa, I'm here waiting for you to pray. Wow. God used the donkey, he can use a telephone, When Ron Cluze told us in the whole class that story, I said, I'm going to ask Lisa. I went and talked to her. And she started to cry. And she said, Pavel, I never realized what a privilege that God is waiting for me to have a relationship and to pray and to study. And I was sleeping while God was waiting for me. And I said that I love Jesus. From that day on, I never started a day in my life without prayer. And she says, I will never miss Jesus. I would rather miss life than to miss a day without him. So folks, it has been a privilege for me to be here. I want to make an appeal to you. Don't lose your time going to church unless you become real Christians. Make prayer, because that's talking to God. Make prayer a priority. Don't worry about changing your life. You cannot. Invite God in your life to take over. And invite him daily. That's your job. Every day. Every day. Every day. Again and again. Lord, keep working on me. I don't deserve it. I cannot do it. Please come into my life. And as you pray every morning and study the word, he will keep working on you without you knowing. And all things that happen through the day, nothing happens by chance. It's him developing necessary characteristics into your life. And you keep praying, and he will get you through. But do not imagine that if we live a formal Christian life, we will make it. Because in him is the power. Make a decision today. You will not be able to do it, but he will do it for you. Lord, wake me up in the morning.